This is Tiffany Fontenot and Patrick Oliver, for We Are Here, a literacy space for Black boys and young Black men. And today we have two very special guests who have made a big impact in literacy for our Black community. The Hudsons are here, and if Patrick, you can go ahead and set up introducing them, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, first of all, thank Wade Hudson and Cheryl Willis Hudson for joining us on a Saturday morning. I mean, hey, many of us, we have so many things we do on Saturday. Our weekend is typically a time we kind of decompress and find time for ourselves. So on behalf of Tiffany and myself, we really want to thank you for, again, taking your Saturday out to be here with us. So again, thank you. And also to those of us who are on with us, same thing for you who are viewing us. Well, thank you for taking your time out on Saturday to really come and learn about the importance of Black literature, publishing, and how we engage young Black boys in that so they can be empowered for the future. And what better guest to have to talk about that are the awesome, phenomenal, I'm gonna throw all these adjectives out there, wonderful, exceptional, because I can say that because I've experienced all of that by being, I can say, friends with Cheryl and Wade for what we've been 20 years now at least.
20 plus, yeah.
20 plus years that we've been working together as friends and associates. So it is definitely a plus. And the work they have been doing it is phenomenal. And that's what we're going to talk about today is the importance of their work as publishers and how it impacts young people around the world, not just here in the United States, but around the world. So that's extremely important. So before I just get started in my in me and Tiffany's questions, will Cheryl and Wade just kind of say a couple of minutes or minute or so to say hello to the folks out there who are joining us.
Well,
go ahead, Cheryl.
Good morning, good afternoon. Well, it's going to be before noon and across the country. So good morning to all of you on Facebook Live. I'm really happy to be here to talk about books, which is one of our favorite things to do. I'm Cheryl Willis Hudson. I'm a co-founder with Wade of Just Us Books, a publishing company, independent publishers, and we focus on Black interest books for young people. We started our company over 33 years ago, and we started really as parents who wanted to get some of this great literature to our kids, and in that process established a publishing company with 100 titles in print, and we're still going on. So welcome and thank you to all of our readers who've supported us all these years.
And I'm Wade Hudson, the other half of what Patrick called the dynamic duo. And
yes.
Yeah, but we today we want to talk to you about two new books that we have out. Both were released on October the 12th. The first is an anthology called Recognize, an anthology honoring and amplifying Black life. And the second one is my coming of age memoir about growing up during the civil rights period in a little small town in Louisiana. And I'm very excited about that book. And both books have gotten really great responses. And
yes,
has been both have been well received. So we're happy to be able to talk about those two books as well as talk about our journey as publishers and writers and activists and advocates and all of those good things.
Mm-hmm.
I think your books have come at the best time, actually, because they complement each other so well. Can you speak to how they complement each other so that teachers who can look at the memoir and then look at the anthology and think about like how these two things work together so that they can use them within classrooms?
Well, recognize is a command. It's declarative, recognize. And that is to make aware, put in front of your face something that is already there. So Recognize is a collection, an anthology. There are 32 contributors, including Wade and myself, of poems, letters, essays, a tribute to Black folklore, there are so many different styles of literature and visual art in this collection. And the collection really speaks to honoring and amplifying Black life as really a result of, it came together as a result of responses to and wanting to put in print and make available affirmations of the fact that Black lives matter. And it came after on the heels of the murder of George Floyd, and how that one incident, among many others, actually mobilized people in a global sense to recognize that Black lives matter, and distortions of imagery that were out in the media and police brutality, all of that were things that we need to look at and recognize as antithetical to our lives and the value of our lives. So this collection speaks to that. And I think Wade can connect it to, this is contemporary, all the authors are contemporary. There are some portions of it that recognize legacy people in our history, like James Baldwin and Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune and Daisy Bates, all people who recognize the value of Black life. And that's something that we've always recognized, and not just as a response or result of a murder or some social injustice. Black lives still have always mattered.
Yeah, and I think to add to what Cheryl has said, Defiant is really saying recognize as well in its way. I think the connecting thread among all the stories and also the memoir is that we are telling our own stories. We are defining our own space. We are sharing our own voice about how we feel about the world around us. And I think that in all of the pieces, whether it's in the anthology, whether it's in Defiant, the memoir, we're not apologizing for who we are. We are declaring who we are. And I think that is so, so important. And in Defiant, when I set out to write the memoir, I did it sort of hesitantly because I didn't know if I was really ready to tell the story about growing up in the Jim Crow South, because I knew it was going to be painful to recall some of the experiences and incidents. But what I found in writing this memoir was how powerful and awesome Black folks in that little small town were, in spite of Jim Crow, in spite of white folks being determined to dehumanize us and to destroy us, and in some ways to annihilate us. Yes, in spite of all of that, man, our people provided the nurturing and the love and the caring and the support that enabled me and others like me to dream about a different kind of future than what they had inherited. And in writing it, I really gained a new appreciation for those people. And again, that's why I say recognize applies to Defiant also, because what I'm saying is recognize these awesome people too.
Yes. What I like too is that for the age group that this book can begin with is the age that they start understanding their identity, right? So these books help confirm where they are with the information that you're providing. One, you have the anthology with these different pieces that works to confirm where they are now in the history that's happening now, but then to also look at Defiant and to see that, this isn't anything new, and that this happened to a boy in another place and time, and to be able to make those connections in different ways too, I think is powerful.
Yeah, and in Defiant, I am asking questions about what's happening around me, and I'm bombarded, as everyone was at that time, with what was happening on the news. I mean, so much happened during that period of time in the late 50s and the 60s. In 1963 alone, Medgar Evers was killed. I think it was in May or June. And then in August, you had the March on Washington. And then in September, those four girls were killed in that church in Alabama. Those are just three of the incidents that happened during that year. And so I'm dealing with all of this. I'm taking all this in, and it's having an impact on me, just as George Floyd's murder and other incidents are having impact on young people today. And again, that's why we felt that we had to do the anthology for that particular age group, because how are they dealing with all of this news that they have been hit with? You know, all these images of violence and the humanization of people who look like them.
Yep.
And so I think that there's a connecting tissue. But I think the other thing about it is that no matter what period of time in which you live, you know, there are some common threads, you know, and one of them is really asking questions about what's happening and
Yes.
wondering, can it and should it be different from what you are facing, you know, and what can you do to help make it different?
Mhm.
And even the moral question of, is what's happening right?
Yeah.
And for kids to start having a place to feel comfortable and asking that.
You know, what Wade has said is so true. They're connecting patterns that are conscious and intentional in the anthology Recognize. We're talking about Jim Crow. We're talking about contemporary authors and illustrators who are writing about Black Lives Matter. And it in terms of literature, there's so much there that all of these authors and illustrators can contribute. I think about, we have some legacy authors like Frances Hopper, who wrote in the 1850s, and she has a poem in our collection called The Slave Mother, and part of which says, he is not hers, although she bore him for a mother's pain. He is not hers, although her blood is coursing through his veins. And it was a cry of a slave mother about her child. And in the same way, George Floyd called out to his mother in a shape poem that Carol Boston Weatherford wrote called Darnella Frazier, who Darnella Frazier was 17, and she was the one who recorded that video. So in 1858, in the time of Frances Harper, she's writing a poem about the pain of a Black mother. And, you know, in 2021, Carol Boston Weatherford is talking about the pain of a child calling out to his mother in that same kind of way. So there are a lot of narratives and connective kinds of things that you can do in an anthology that you may not be able to do in just one piece. And I think that's the reason that Recognize can really be so valuable in terms of looking at Black joy and Black history and Black agency, and just agency for people in general during a time at which so many of our values in terms of social justice are being questioned.
And I think what Recognize also does, to add to what Cheryl is saying, it sort of sets the tone for us that declares Black folks have been saying that Black life matters for nearly 300 years. And Black life matters in all aspects of our experiences, whether we are inventing, we are showing that Black life matter, whether we are creating music, whether we are writing books, or whether we are having a family gathering in the backyard barbecuing, we are showing that Black life matter. And we are a whole people, not necessarily a fragmented people, and where folks recognize our lives when we lose our lives. We recognize our lives not only when we lose our lives, but as we live our lives, we recognize the importance.
I like that point so much, because another great thing about both of these books are the intergenerational conversation that within our community, we need to be having. And I think
Mhm.
both of these books provide, especially the anthology, like places to have these conversations, to think about, how can we meet and talk differently amongst us about these issues as well. So I think that it lends to that too.
Yeah, and to kind of continue on somebody to Tiffany's point of educators having these books, um, and you producing both these two books we're talking about, it almost goes back to the reason you started Just Us Books. If we think about it, it's like you're saying, hey, you better recognize the richness and beauty of Black culture, and it needs to be read about. And you were somewhat defiant in the sense that, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to publish these books if you're not going to do it or not.
No, you're exactly right too. And I think also, Pat, I mean, we produced the books that we've done and hundreds of them for young people. But I think a part of it is also producing these books for the children that we were, and we didn't have these books,
Right.
So we were addressing that as well, in Defiant, I talk about not having books in our school library or books in the curriculum that really spoke in any appreciable way to the importance of Black life or Black history and Black culture. And as a young Black boy growing up, I was crying out for that, but I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know where to go. And I think readers can sort of feel the frustration of that little boy growing up in Mansfield looking for answers that he couldn't really find in the people, from the people around him and from the material that he had available. And I describe having found the interview of Malcolm X that was done in Playboy magazine in 1963, and what a profound impact that had on me, because some of the questions I was asking, Malcolm X addressed in that interview when he talked about how there was a concerted effort to distort and hide Black history, so that white history could be promoted, and I started making connections to that. And that opened a whole nother way of
Right.
not only looking at myself, but looking at the people around me, understanding that it was not their fault, but that, there was a grand plan that was instituted over centuries that got us to where we were at that particular time when I was growing up.
And two, for those who are understanding that social justice matters, and to use this book as a mirror, right? I mean, as a window to see what this experience is like. So it's important too that, folks outside of the Black community, white folks, other, minoritized folks, so that they can see the experience and understand it, because it's in a book, it's there, it's the cycles of these patterns is nothing new. So it means a lot for our community and the confirmation to have these books, but also so that others outside of the community can learn from these experiences and the frustrations and the feelings that are like relayed in these books, so that they can understand that this is not just why are they always angry? There's a reason why. It's a system to these things, and they can understand it through these books.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
think that's really true. I mean, in terms of the variety, for example, of Recognize, there's an essay written by Adedeo Perkovich about claiming her space as a high school student, and having gone through Central Park and finding out about Seneca Village. I mean, we have so much about our history that has been erased, that we don't know about. And she was walking through Central Park and saw a small plaque. This is where Seneca Village happened in the 1800s. It was a thriving Black community right where Central Park is now. And actually, that community was destroyed. The houses were evacuated. I mean, people were evicted for their homes so that they could put a park there, supposedly for the people. And that was a vibrant community, a Black community and a multiracial community too, because there were other people who lived in the community together that we knew nothing about. And how, as a teenager, how could you not know this? How could you not know this growing up and living close to Central Park? Or how, as a nation, you can't know about what happened in Tulsa in 1921. It's unspeakable. I mean, a history of hundreds of people who were killed, a whole community that was destroyed, burned, bombed. And we don't know it in our history. So that narrative, that footprint, that making it public, speaking in our own voices and discovering our history is something not only Blacks need to know, but everybody needs to know, so that we can have social justice.
And I think too, it's important that we continue to write and produce books that bring our experiences to life, our history, our culture. But I think what's missing in the equation is there aren't that many books written by white authors about the white experience from an enlightened point of view. By that, I mean, from time to time, we'll get inquiries from white writers who want to write submit a manuscript about a Black person, about some aspect of Black history. And we always say, well, why don't you write about what it was like when you were growing up, and how did you deal with racism in your family, since you now believe that you're not racist anymore? How did you get to that point where you're not racist anymore? And I think we need those kinds of books, particularly for white children, because our books are sort of helping to expand the horizon for people of color and Black children and white children to some degree. But I think writing about the white experience from an enlightened point of view would actually make the equation complete, and I pray that there are white writers who are looking. I know there are a couple of books like that, but we need many of them.
Yes, the narrative of that internal struggle with white folks dealing with ethical and moral issues in that spectrum of coming to a place of not understanding their privilege to when they do, to understanding systemic racism, to have that documented and explained in different ways, a narrative, a fiction, or whatever, like an informational text, all that needs to be out there. You are absolutely right, because to understand that struggle is to better understand, like how to reach, folks differently, to make that connection of why these things are happening.
And by doing that, it really puts it on a human struggle where we are all engaged and involved in this effort to make this a better and a fair world.
Yes.
And so, Wade is sure, as we're talking about inclusion, why guy contact you about, well, not just him, like you said, several have contacted you. When we think about what's been in the news lately about the exclusion of Black literature in classrooms and in society, it's really troubling. When we think about these school boards are making efforts to exclude books written by Black folks, for Black folks, and for everybody, like you just said. I know they kind of make you cringe when you hear those, when you see those stories come across the news screen, or however you catch the news, as publishers of books.
Well, we don't believe in censorship, but this whole anti-truth narrative that's coming out, is playing out in Texas and Virginia, and it speaks to the fear that people in power, or some people, have of questioning the truth, that the history of indigenous people is not the Thanksgiving pilgrim turkey story, and there's a lot invested in a capitalist society of keeping those narratives going. So I think to play on people's fears that the Black man is coming, that the Black man is dangerous, that Black boys are marginalized and need to be followed, driving while Black, walking while Black, running in a neighborhood while Black. These things are deeply embedded in systemic racism, so that you do have this fallback in terms of parents requesting that a book like Jerry Craft's book, New Kid or a Class Act, be taken from the library because of some false narrative that they are perpetuating about critical race theory, which it doesn't have anything to do with the books that are published. It has to do with the fact that there are more people of color, more people who in the LGBTQ community, more indigenous people that are writing books that threaten the power structure. So we just have to continue to be vigilant and produce books and recognize authors who are telling the truth. And it's the truth is hard to bear for some people who are very much vested in not having it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think too, Pat, I see it as a part of a larger kind of effort on the part of those who are in control to contain the narrative and control the narrative about who we are as a nation, who we are as people. And I'm not surprised at this. Historically, whenever there's seemingly progress being made, there's always a pushback that is manifested in so many different kinds of ways. Whether you're looking at the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s, and then the more majority pushback against that in the 70s and the 80s with Nixon and Reagan. If you want to go back, to the end of the Civil War, during the period of Reconstruction, we have 10 to 12 years of progress where Black people had some agency, but then there was a pushback, an enormous pushback, and that's when you get the Jim Crow laws and a new form of slavery, called Jim Crow. So I think what's different, hopefully, about this period is that there are more people who are, when I say people, white people who are enlightened and understand that we cannot go back to the way it was, and they will become not just allies, because I don't like to use that term ally, but become partners in continuing to push for progress. But what's happening is, to me, it's a natural reaction on the part of folks who want to continue the racist supremacy narrative that they've been propagating for forever, and I think they are desperate now because they can no longer control the narrative the way they used to, because there's so many ways that we can communicate with each other. We can get information out. We can connect with each other, so trying to they're not just talking about, these books, they're actually banning a lot of these books.
Right.
And we just don't hear about what's happening in a lot of these school districts.
Yes,
where
yes.
committees are actually banning books, so it's an onslaught, and I think we have to continue to push against them. And then those white people who are our partners need to continue to speak up.
Mhm. Hey, my name is Patrick Oliver, and this is Tiffany Fontenot. I was invited by Tiffany Fontenot to be part of this, who's a library extraordinaire, to be part of this vlog that she has created, and had a pleasure of being part of it. So we're here once a month on Saturday, having very important conversations about young people, particularly our boys, making sure they have access to books. And so we bring innovators on like Wade and Cheryl Hudson, who is here with us today. We'll be getting to some questions soon, so I just want folks to get your questions ready. I know some of you have made comments already that I've saw. Thank you for your comments. So yeah, So we're here once a month on Saturday. So look out for us once a month on Saturday to be here. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I was gonna say,
Tiffany, I wanted to ask you a question. As a librarian, I mean, what do you see that's really happening in terms of the progress that has been made? And, you know, if the progress in terms of inclusion, diversity, and all of that, do you think that we can maintain it and continue to grow that progress? What do you see it as a librarian?
I see a lot of boots on the ground librarians who understand the importance of getting these books in kids' hands. I see, quite honestly, a lot of fear of leadership in terms of implementing this, because a lot of them don't understand the cultural competency to understand how to navigate ensuring that censorship doesn't happen and things like that. So it's like, I think for the librarians that are there, they're doing the work and creating the programming and things like that. But when there's community backlash, that's when it becomes a problem, right? And it's how to deal with that and to have the leadership to support the backlash and know that in the end, in a democratic society, we all have access. We have First Amendment rights to knowledge and education. That's why these public libraries were invented and came about, right? So we have to have this information, and we have to have the cultural competency, because we're in a profession that's what, 80-something% white. You know what I mean? To be able to, you know, like ensure that the information of minoritized folks is represented and available and accessible. I see these librarians working in school libraries and everything, but they're fighting an uphill battle, and we need a lot more leadership within the profession in terms of library directors, you know, and policies and things like that, to ensure that they have something to stand on to make sure we have these books available.
Are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful, but I know it's an iterative, slow struggle. But I am hopeful because there is a lot more enlightenment. Like you've been saying, it's harder to hide the truth, and these conversations are being had. But for every 2 steps forward, there's that 1 step back in policy, you know, so we just have to keep finding ways to counter that, to keep it moving. But I see a lot of librarians doing great work, and we need to get more minoritized librarians in this profession, point blank, period. Yep.
Because libraries, they are the hubs, you know, like you were saying, and folks need to understand. You mentioned the word policy. We have to vote, folks, you know, because that way we know we can have friendly politicians who will support librarians being in our neighborhoods, and at the same time, those are your taxpayer dollars. You know, so why not support libraries? Your money is being used, whether you like it or not, to support public libraries. So it's important. Tiffany, I love their point about we got to get into the profession. We need to have our kids think about librarianship.
And ask, go ahead. I was going to say, ask about why library programming isn't, they should be having book clubs on Defiant and Recognize. Why aren't they?
And to the same point that there are some politicians who are leading backlash by asking or requiring or saying, here are, I want a list of all of the books that you have published. I can't remember the name of the legislator, I think in Texas.
Krause, in Texas, Krause.
Yeah, Krause, yeah.
Who had a list of
850 titles.
And most of which were written by people of color or people in the LGBTQ community. And I think there was a librarian who responded to that by saying, and that's a fear tactic to tie people up and say, you know, like these shouldn't be in the library because 1 or 2 people object to a book for their child, so it should be pulled from the library. PEN America fights against censorship, and there are library policies that support public education. And I think this librarian wrote an essay to say that this is unfair for this politician to request this when all of the books in the library are a part of the card catalog and it's public knowledge. So that shouldn't be something that he's requesting of a library to do, to see if that book is in your collection. That's diversionary tactics to get people to say, oh, these books in the library, we shouldn't have them there, and they should come off of the shelves until we find out if it offends one or two people in the community. So there are a lot of strategies that people to the right and a part of some other larger point are trying to make about access to people of color and people who have been defined in the margins.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the game plan.
Yeah,
is to raise questions about these titles. So then, as Tiffany was saying, people who are librarians and teachers don't know what to do. So rather than deal with the backlash from sometimes several parents, they'll remove a book from the reading list, for that reason. Pat, I was going to ask you too, because you're involved in the community. What do you see, from a community aspect in terms of progress that's being made? Are we making headway in reaching Black boys, in changing the landscape? I mean, what do you see? I mean, we heard what Tiffany said about from the librarian perspective, and we talked about the publishing, and
Right.
So what about from because you're doing programs around the country?
Right. Yeah. That's a good question, Wade. In some ways, I'm elated. I do the book engagements for you, Cheryl and Derek, and other authors, and I'm happy to see a lot of librarians are actually contacting me, for next year. Of course, a lot of them want to talk about Black History Month. But I try to remind them, look, Black authors are available more than just Black History Month.
Yep.
But we are getting the inquiries, and some of the inquiries that I'm getting from some of the librarians and the educators are specific about their concern about Black boys. So that's nice to see. In their email inquiry, they're saying, hey, we in this community, we're Title I school, a free lunch school. Hey, what can your authors, writers can provide to our school via Zoom right now or on site that will speak to our, concern that we have for Black boys. So I am seeing, those direct inquiries. Not enough in terms of the statistics associated with Black boys in literacy. We should, schools should be just looking hard and consistently for ways to reach Black boys, particularly through all this literature that's available out there now. So I am seeing, a sense of urgency, but not to the level that we see if we talk about the educational deficiencies of Black boys when it comes to literacy. And as we well know, if Black boys are not doing well in language arts, they most certainly are struggling in the sciences, in social studies, in math. So it's, we have to make sure our boys can read. So Wade, excellent question, but not, I'm seeing some requests for programming, but not to the level that it really should be.
I think there needs to be imagining of how we do this, because as we hear, a lot of teachers are leaving the profession. So how can we utilize them differently to solve those type of issues? How can we use our libraries differently? I think we need to, in our community advocates, can teachers train the community literacy advocates differently so that we can get literacy differently within our communities? We need to think about training the trainers differently and implementing programs like that. So I think with COVID and everything happening in this shakeup kind of in the structure of things, is an important time to really reconceptualize our outreach and how our skill sets can be used differently to get these messages out there.
No, I agree with you. I think Pat and Cheryl and I have talked about this in the past. We need to find ways to engage people in the community, church groups, fraternities, sororities. Many of them are already organized. So it really is a matter of coming up with a game plan that will enable them to have some degree of success so they can continue to do that work. But I agree with you, Tiffany. But I think it's going to have to come from leadership, people coming up with great ideas that can be implemented in the community. And those ideas don't have to necessarily come from educators or librarians. They can come from community people, community leaders as well. So the educators and the librarians have to listen to these community people who are coming to them with great ideas. But I think it needs to be an all hands on deck approach to this.
Yes,
Yes.
most certainly.
I'm waiting on this literacy, like advocacy. It needs to be like on such a national level. Where's our literacy convention with all these groups coming together saying, let's create our agenda? When is that going to happen?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it's going to have to come from people like us. You know,
I think people in the community that they have people. Some people in the community have started that, like Tiffany, you mentioned online book clubs, reading groups that make literacy, which is reading, being able to use words in all kinds. It's not just reading a book and you're learning how to spell. Comprehension and finding directions and how to read a map and how to read signs. These kinds of things can be lifted up through book clubs, and so that reading itself is not a chore, but it's done for pleasure. So what we have been trying to do with Just Us Books, in the books that we have published over the years, is normalize Black life in terms of clothes I love to wear. Something like playing dress up is something that you can do and you can read about and you can identify as an action, and learn from and learn reading and labels and colors without it being a chore, without it being something, oh, I hate to read because I got to read this long passage about X, Y, and Z.
Do a report.
Do a report, have the information. You can write about cowboys, Black cowboys, and learn about the role that they played in building the West, and at the same time dispel the imagery that you get on the reruns that are on TV with Roy Rogers and Gene Autry, and what that was like, and also be corrective in terms of what was happening with Native American peoples who were abused, and their land was stolen, and who was the hero, who cowboys versus Indians. There's so much that you can do through literature, and good literature, that that's what we've been trying to do through Just Us Books, through the various kinds of books that we publish.
And I think also,
go ahead, Wade.
I was going to say, and again, I think Pat, you and Cheryl and I have talked about this. One issue that I really have, there are a lot of organizations that donate books to communities, and where on the face it looks like it's great, but one thing we found out over the years is that it's important for children to understand that books have value and worth, right? So, I mean, they're not going to get sneakers given to them. I'm not saying books should not be given, but I'm saying we have to really think deeply about what that means. If a kid wants a toy, the parents have to pay for it. I mean, almost everything that they get, they have to pay something for it. And if you're just giving books away, and we've gone to programs where we've contributed to book donation, and we see books on the floor, I mean, in garbage cans, because I think what has not happened is that there isn't a plan in place to help these young people who are getting the books understand the value and the worth of the books. So they get the free books and they look at the cover and then toss it away, So the hard work of really helping them understand how important books are, and sometimes giving folks things for free, it minimizes the worth and the value of those things. I'm not saying not to do it, but just think it through when you're giving those books away. Maybe have some kind of incentive involved in it. So it's just not just a freebie, you know.
And folks, and also to organizations, quit contacting Black publishers and asking for free books. You know,
Thank you.
Can we talk
I mean,
about the
I worked at Third World Press, and the work, while there, and I've even had ways some of the people who contacted me about you and Cheryl speaking want to know if I book you, what amount of free books can they get? And I'm like, that's a whole nother conversation, y'all.
Yeah.
It is, it's back to your point. We have to value literature and really appreciate what literature does for our community. But yes, an excellent point, Wade. We have to, like you said, our kids see us buying books because in
Right.
most cases, our kids only see books at school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hakeem makes a statement, he repeats it a lot, but it makes sense. Is that he said, I go to your home and see what kind of books you got on your shelf to determine what's the future of your child or
Yeah.
yourself. Because you have books laying around your house. Hey, we know what's happening.
Can we
Yeah.
talk about the importance of Black bookstores and Black publishing and how that, like that needs to be supported as well? Because we have, like, it seems to be in a greater awareness of Black bookstores now, and people have been creating like quasi community places and bookstores and things like that. Like this holiday season coming up, I just think it's no more an important time when we talk about the value of books and supporting Black literature. The importance of understanding that these spaces exist and how important it is to support them.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%. When we first started in 1988, and Pat, you probably remember this, by the mid 90s, there were over 300 Black booksellers. Some of them were bookstores, some of them were a combination of clothing stores and books, but there were more than three to 400 places where people could go around the country and buy Black books. Not only that, you had booksellers selling on the street. I mean, you could go to 125th Street and
Right.
see a table full of Black books being sold, LA. And it was like a community kind of effort to promote literature and to promote books. And that died out, I guess, probably when we came to the new century, 2000. And I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I looked at the number of Black book sellers. There were like maybe 50 viable ones. Now, as you said, Tiffany, it is increasing. Now there are a lot more out there, and we need to support them. But what I would encourage Black booksellers to do is to do more community events. That is so key to really connecting to the folks in the community and getting them to support you. And you do that by having activities and programs that engage them and interest them and make them want to come to your store, not just to buy books, but to get information, sometimes to be entertained, with a great storyteller, so there are different ways of marketing your bookstore. So I would encourage them to do more of those kinds of things too.
And on the We Are Here a Facebook page, there's a link to Black bookstores and a directory to Black bookstores. So if you don't know where your local one is, there is a link to find one. So they're all there. So make sure that you do that. And there's no need for libraries and bookstores to compete.
Right.
We need to be more collaborative on that. This is just a point where it's just collaboration is key, and both can help each other, and those things need to be thought of as well, to me.
Well, in fact, we just did an in-person book talk at our local library here in East Orange, and a independent bookstore actually sold our books at the library. So it was a collaboration between the two, and I think we need to do more of those kinds of collaborative efforts, particularly libraries supporting Black bookstores and independent bookstores to come to sell the books.
Libraries
Mhm.
could be buying their books from independent bookstores. If you don't know, that pipeline needs to be happening.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So folks, we have a time for a couple of questions. Go ahead and put it in the comment section. I just want to shout out to Cheryl and Wade. We talk about the anthology Recognize, but I really enjoy We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices. That's one of my favorites. I mean, I hadn't quite got through Recognize yet, but We Rise, excellent selection of contributors that are here. So I want folks, to get this one as well. I've been doing some of the essays with some middle school and high schoolers, and they really resonated with it, because the stories were short, quick, and gave them a chance to think about something they can really, really relate to. Black History Month is coming up, Women History Month. So, folks, this is a beautiful book for young people. Cheryl's book, Brave Black First. Cheryl, you want to just tell them a little bit about that real quick?
Well, Brave Black First is really a collaborative effort too, between myself. Crown is the publisher, so I'm the author of this book. It was illustrated by Aaron K. Robinson, and it's a 50 plus African-American women who changed the world. And it's really a wonderful book. Research was done, some of the research done at the Smithsonian Institute. So it's really a collaboration between the Smithsonian Institute and National Museum of African American History and Culture. And these, again, are short entry biographies of women who were fearless, bold, change makers. Mary McLeod Bethune, Michelle Obama, Ida B. Wells, short, brief biographies. But one of the things that's so wonderful about it is the illustrations pick up from Aaron Robinson are gorgeous, beautiful illustrations, and the research was done at the Smithsonian. So for each person in the book, there is an object or a publication that's a part of the National Museum of African American History and Culture or part of the Smithsonian. So in the index, you can find clothing and letters, photographs related to the personalities in this book actually in the museum. So you can go there and touch and feel and see what's happening with each one of them.
And I mentioned Black History Month, Wednesday. I don't skipped all over Kwanzaa and Christmas. These are perfect books. Black Friday coming up. These are perfect books for our children to have for, Christmas, Kwanzaa. So let's blow up Black bookstores, Black publishers, hit their websites and hit them hard. Wade, look, y'all, Wade got skills, Journey poem, he got a little rhythm in there. I was reading the poem. It's like, he had the soul, that soul, Earth, Wind, and Fire, kind of smooth, kind of move. So Third World Press published a collection of his poems. It's called Journey, and it's a good collection, So I said, Wade got all these different skills he putting out there in front of us, and this is another one. So, and it's a beautiful collaboration. It shows the humbleness and how we work together. Third World Press published this, people.
Yeah.
Third World Press published a book. Wade could have did it himself, but he saw, hey, let's do something together, Hockey. And Hockey had been asking Wade for years, and it happened. So this is this is the things that are going on in our community in terms of Black literary excellence that's taking place. But we need to focus in on that as opposed to some beef Kanye West is having with somebody. Let's talk about the collaborations and the growth that's happening in our community around Black excellence, Black literature. Let's do that. Let's stay out of the entertainment world, y'all, for a minute. For this next few months, jump into the literary world. I want to just y'all I know some of the entertainers gonna be mad at me, but let's put a blinder for a little bit on entertainment and let's do books. Let's do them for our children. That's the main thing. That's what me and Tiffany is trying to do with this B block, is focused on these Black boys out here. You go to these schools, we do these workshops. Wade and Cheryl familiar with it. It's a repetitive thing I'm about to say, but if you ask Black boys what their future is going to be, we know what they're going to say, folks. We know what they're going to say: professional sports. And that is because we perpetuated by enrolling them in weekend sports, which I'm a former coach. I love sports, but why not put boys in weekend book clubs, art classes, that sort of thing? Because they can become the next illustrator.
Right. And
That's
if I
right.
could say something about the illustration, the thing about all of these books, visual literacy is so important. Some of
Yes.
us, as uh, appreciators of art, the first art that we're going to see in our lifetime is going to be in a book. This cover, which you can't, maybe I can't hold it correctly because the cover is was done by Floyd Cooper.
Beautiful.
Fantastic illustrator who just passed away recently, but there is a color section in this book, Recognize, where there are images that speak to Black Lives Matter. So not only do you see Floyd Cooper, but Pat Cummings,
Wow.
London Ladd,
Beautiful.
beautiful illustration
Yes.
of Breonna Taylor. I mean, images affect us in so many ways visually. A picture, they say, says 1,000 words. And the title of this particular portrait of Breonna Taylor is Remember Her Name.
Mm.
Very important that, you know, many of us were nameless or didn't have last names as a result of systemic racism and being enslaved. So there's so much that you can see in visual images, in pictures,
Yes.
our children. The picture here on the right is by James Ransom, A Black Boy's Journey. And to see a Black boy, really a dark-skinned boy, is a visual statement. That's revolutionary in terms of being in publications too, because so very often in commercial publications, you've got the light skin or brown skin or kind of middle tone skin complexion to represent all Black people. And we know that that's not the case, that we go from the lightest to the very darkest. So encourage people to see in our books and in other books that are published, the beauty and joy of the artwork itself, which is a strong
Yes.
indicator of how Black Lives Matter.
Like
Yeah.
this wonderful illustration for the cover of Defiant that was done by Charlie Palmer.
Mhm.
I mean, a fantastic fine artist and illustrator of books for young children. He grew up in the South. Exactly, you have it, Pat. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful cover, and I mean, people pick up the book sometimes because of the cover
Yeah.
of it.
Well, you mentioned Charlie Palmer. You mentioned the word fine artist. Charlie Palmer is well noted. I mean, he's a fine artist.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Back to Cheryl's point, you're not only buying a book, you're buying fine art.
That's exactly
You're
right,
buying,
Pat.
so you're buying fine literature and fine art. You know?
Exactly right. Exactly.
You're on mute, Tiffany.
As a teacher, use those visuals for writing prompts and discussion prompts, because those are the hooks to get kids into the word. Like, understand how visual literacy works and share that knowledge so that other people can do the same, to use those visuals as a form of communication to help kids get more into books as well, because that's a huge thing that's missing. My daughter wasn't a great reader, but she read graphic novels, and graphic novels was the gateway to other books. So think about those ways when we start, thinking about engaging folks with literacy. Use those
I'd
visuals.
like to, just to mention too that, as a graphic artist, again, one of the artists, Don Tate, wrote a piece, How to Be an Activist, and he's an author, but he did an 8-page story about how he came to recognize that his contribution to Black Lives Matter was being a graphic artist and putting into words and pictures and thought balloons and bubbles
Wow.
the understanding of how he could be an activist and how he could engage with his son and his family. So there are many things in this volume that can be used in a lot of different ways by teachers of English, teachers of social studies. And to your point, Tiffany, also in the back of the book, there are pictures of the illustrators, of the biographies of people who contributed, but also short descriptions by each one of the artists. There are 8 artists in this book who talk about their inspiration for what they did. In terms of really curating this book, we ask people to speak to the value of what does it mean to you that Black Lives Matter? And everybody gave a different response, a different visual picture. And so each one of them, London Ladd, for example, was inspired by the case of Breonna Taylor and what was going on at that time, and his relationship to his daughter, who was around the same age of Breonna Taylor. So you can see how visual artists are influenced by the news and by things going on around them in their lives. And they are the ones who are really putting the footprint there of what our culture is in the present time. Fine artists and writers do that for us.
Yes. Well, hey, it has been great. I want to give a shout out to some of the folks who've been online. Gwen Mitchell, who was over at Third World Press, well, used to be at Third World Press. She's on here with us. Dr. Janae Moore, who's a psychiatrist. Juliet Allen, Doctor. Some folks I know, a lot of the folks on here, I don't know many of them, but I just want to shout out to some folks who are authors, writers, literary enthusiasts, and social workers who are in and really understand the importance of our children having the kind of books that they need in life. Cheryl and Wade, you want to give us a closing comment, and then Tiffany, you can go close it out after them.
Cheryl, you want to?
Great, I've been talking.
We never get enough of you, though. You know?
Yeah. Well, we look forward to these kinds of forums, Pat and Tiffany, so that we can share. What's important for us is not only that we tell our story, the Just Us book story, but we share your story, Tiffany and Pat, because it's really a collaborative kind of effort to make change, and sometimes share. And that's why I asked you guys a couple of questions, because I felt that you had a lot to bring to the table in our discussion. And I think what you shared helped to flesh out, the discussion so that it can be more impactful. So thank you for this opportunity, and hey, call on us again. We'd love to share again.
I just appreciate the both of y'all for creating a lane in terms of Black literacy. That needs to be forefronted just in terms of your contribution, because you created a reflection, like I said, for my kids and for people you will never meet, you have influenced. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Before we go, I do want to just recognize some of the outstanding Black book creators who've gone on to be with the ancestors this year. Floyd Cooper, Cheryl mentioned Floyd. Floyd did the illustration for Recognize. Also Burnett Ford, who was a forerunner and a pioneer in children's book publishing. Jerry Pinkney just recently transitioned about two or 3 weeks ago. In fact, we were doing a celebration for Burnett, and Andrea Pinkney, who is Jerry's daughter-in-law, was one of the participants. And before we actually went live, she received a call that there was, a serious issue in her family. And so later on, we found out that Jerry had passed away. And also Eloise Greenfield passed away. And so we want to recognize these trailblazers, these people who open doors and knock down barriers so that we can continue. And the progress that has been made so far, and there's still a lot more to be done, we owe a debt of gratitude to those folks who came before.
Absolutely.
Hey, I want to give a quick shout out, and we thank you for that, Wade, too. A bookstore in my home state that's showing this in their bookstore, Pyramid Art and Books. Phyllis Brown, thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you. Phyllis Brown, thank you so much for having us on in the bookstore and sharing some comments with you. So again, thank you so much. A lot of good stuff coming up in the future. Wade, myself, and Derek Barnes got some coming up here in the future. We're going to do something around Black boys and being literate. So again, we got a lot coming up. Stay tuned, stay in the mix, and hey, just be nice to everybody as we all get through this very tough time of COVID, and we're finally getting back out there and seeing each other. So keep the smiles when you do step outside. Peace and blessings, everybody.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Tiffany.
So much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.